This is our story.
This is our story.
This is our story.
This is our story.
Đây là chuyện của tôi.
This is our story.
This is our story.
This is our story.
This is our story.
This story is a story of God's faithfulness, a story of His provision, a story of His mission through one local church, the chapel. On January 29, 2017, Pastor Jerry announced the beginning of a 5-year vision, where we sensed God was leading us as a local church. He talked about 3 categories of vision: expand, partner, and release. This would mean the expansion of our footprint as a local church through additional campuses, the continued and growing partnerships through Kingdom Come, and also the release of all debt as a church. A lot has happened since then. So much has changed in our world and even in our church since that time. But God has been faithful, and it's time to celebrate.
In 2010, our church was growing numerically. But as our church grew, our impulse for mission was leading us to think differently. We began asking different questions about how we could release people to live out their faith in places they live, learn, work, and play. God had already been stirring in our church's leadership that the chapel was to be a sending church. We had recently planted new expressions of the local church in a short span of time. The chapel at Elmwood, the Well, and Restoration Church, all within the previous 3 years. But this commitment to church planting was one half of a 2-pronged approach to increasing gospel saturation in Western New York. The other, additional campuses of the chapel in local geographies. And so, on Easter Sunday of 2010, the chapel at Lockport was born. Meeting in the historic Palace Theater in Lockport, with additional space across the street at the old post office, the chapel officially became one church in multiple campuses. Over time, the need for a permanent space became more pressing, and a search throughout Lockport began. The former St. Mary's of Lockport was ideal, but initially was unavailable. After a lengthy search through many more properties, God opened up doors we never thought possible, and we moved into the former St. Mary's in June of 2014.
In October 2014, that same mission impulse led us to begin another campus in Cheektowaga, which was launched out of a Regal Cinema in the Walden Galleria Mall. Every Sunday, a team of volunteers at 7 a.m. rolled over 40 road cases through the mall to set up for our worship gatherings. It was a heavy lift each and every week, but it was well worth it. But the time also came to look for a permanent home. The former Movieland 8 was an ideal setting and location, but there seemed to be no path forward to ownership. Once again, in God's own time and in His own surprising way, we were reapproached about the Movieland property seemingly out of the blue. This building, right around the corner from the Galleria Mall, became our permanent home for the Cheektowaga campus in June of 2018.
As part of this 5-year vision, this mission carried us forward to launch a new campus in Niagara Falls. Our team looked at over 40 vacant buildings in that region. Yet none of these locations were best suited to accommodate the needs of our ministry. Eventually, we decided to launch out of another Regal Cinema, this time in Niagara Falls, right off the 190. As we readied ourselves for the very first service at the Regal, we took a second look at the former Niagara Catholic High School. As we sought God's leadership and listened for His direction, it became clear that this is exactly where we're supposed to be. In December of 2021, we held our first service in this new facility.
Lockport, Cheektowaga, Niagara Falls. 3 campuses of the chapel that were born out of this commitment to reaching every man, woman, and child with repeated opportunities to hear and see the gospel. And we stand here today in awe of what God has done. In the 13 and a half years since the launch of the Lockport campus, we have been able to establish a permanent ministry presence in all 3 communities. We celebrate His provision and His goodness. But this story isn't just about buildings. It's about people having access to the gospel. It's about bringing the good news into spaces and places where it's most needed. These campuses are not about building a brand. It's about building the kingdom. So yes, the footprint of the chapel has expanded considerably over these years, but our aim is still the same: the expansion of the gospel in our region.
This is our story.
이게 저희의 이야기입니다.
This is our story.
Izi Nizohuru.
Este es nuestra historia.
This is our story.
This is our story.
This is our story.